All right, welcome back. We are now ready for our next speaker, Tim Cady, who is a COE lead turned consultant. He's also North Texas Tug lead, and he says he's always under constant improvement. And he didn't put this in his bio, but you know, he likes the Philadelphia Eagles. So, I mean,
womp womp.
yeah, I know.
That makes us frenemies, right?
Football team fan. I'm like, oh, but yeah, you're here.
Yeah, so thanks for the intro. Let me go ahead and start sharing here. Oh, sorry, one second. All right, at this point, didn't hit share. All right, Emily, just let me know real quick. You can see my PowerPoint?
Yep, you're good.
Perfect. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. As you saw in that previous slide, we're going to talk about RegEx today, a little bit about what regular expressions are, how to use them in Tableau. Before we get started, though, a quick disclaimer, by no means am I a RegEx expert. This is something I picked up kind of over quarantine, been able to leverage it in a couple of my projects. And I thought it made a lot of sense to share with kind of the greater community. But before we get started, I just want to do a quick introduction here. My name is Tim Cady. I actually just joined the team at JPMorgan Chase as a data visualization manager. A few fun facts, a little background about me there on the screen. Previous to joining the team at JPMC, I was doing contracting consulting with the team Radical Shift Consulting here in Dallas, Texas. And before that, a few years before that, I did lead a data viz COE at a financial services company, also here in just north of Dallas. But enough about me. Let's kind of hop into the agenda today. As I mentioned, I prepared this presentation with the mindset that for most folks, RegEx might be a new tool or skill set. In my years using Tableau, I've only come across maybe a handful of folks who have claimed to use it, or excuse me, to know it, let alone use it kind of in their day-to-day work. So with that, kind of here's how we're going to kind of go through this today. First, like I mentioned, what is a regular expression? When should you use them? Followed by talking through some of the basic regex characters, some of the syntax in putting those statements together. And finally, we're going to put it into practice. We're going to do a couple of demos in Tableau for 3 of the 4 Tableau calculated fields for regex. We're going to skip that last one there, inth, and we'll talk about why a little bit later. So first, what is a regular expression? So the simplest way, the most straightforward way to describe a regular expression is it's a sequence of characters that define a search pattern. Now, a search pattern isn't probably something you use in your day-to-day work. So what exactly do I mean by that? So in this example that we've just pulled up here, we're using regex extract on a comment field. Now, this can be a free-form text field or a notes field, what have you. What we've highlighted there in yellow is the search pattern, right? So could look a little overwhelming at first. If that's the case, do not worry. We're going to come back and break this down piece by piece. All you need to know for now is this is a common format for a common search pattern for a street address. So you see in our examples there at the bottom, that search pattern could return to you something like 21 Jump Street. Also, a couple examples there of common search patterns for phone numbers, email addresses. The most important thing to understand when you're leveraging regex is that you need to know you're looking for a particular pattern. So you're not just doing a wildcard search on a freeform text field. You're actually looking for something very specific, whether it be a URL, like you see there, a phone number, email address, that sort of thing. So now that you know what regex is, you need to know when you can use it. So So really it can be used on any free-form text field if you're looking for a particular substring. But of course, that doesn't mean you should. Ideally, regex is meant for unstructured data. Like we just mentioned in our previous example, a comment field or a notes section. Maybe even you have a CSV data source with a missing delimiter, right? Regex might come in handy there. You might be thinking to yourself at this point, hey, I can accomplish some of those same things with contains or maybe even a split. And in most cases, you'd be right. But if we have something like that, like a comment field that has quite a bit in there, contains and split would work situationally, but they're not going to kind of cover all your bases like a regex calculation would. All right, so I promised you we'd go back and break that regex statement down piece by piece. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's look exactly how that's working. So an important note here is when you're writing or reading a regex statement, you're doing it positionally. You're doing it one step at a time, one word at a time, one character at a time. So we've already established that search pattern is looking for a street address, right? So the first position that we have there is the character looking for a digit. So that's the lowercase d. And that digit's going to return 1 to 5 characters. That's what that squiggly bracket is there with the 1 to 5. And the result of that is, of course, 21. The next position we have there is a backslash lowercase s. That returns any instance of a space. The next position, backslash w plus. So what that's going to look for is a word of unknown character length, thus the plus. If you just did w by itself, it's going to return to you a single letter. More on those in a second. Again, the backslash s returning to us the space. And finally, the w plus again, followed by a backslash period. Now what that's doing, normally, period is a wildcard character in regex, but when it's preceded by a backslash like that, it makes it literal. So what I'm telling the statement or the search pattern is I want to find a word that's followed immediately by a period, in this case, st or street with a period. All right, so let's look at a couple of other basic character classes, a couple of the basic syntax for regex. A couple of these we already covered, of course. So you see the lowercase d, s, and w there. Important to know that regex is case sensitive. So if I was to change that lowercase d to an uppercase d, it's going to search or return to me anything but a number. Same thing with the space, same thing with the w for the alphanumeric characters. And at the bottom, I kind of made note of this already, but the period, when used without a backslash, represents a wildcard. And with that backslash preceding that period, it's a literal character, becomes a period in a true sense. On the right side there, you'll see quantifiers. So we talked about these a little bit already, but just to know what they are specifically is when you use the plus sign in your regex statement, you're looking for one or more instances of the specified pattern. So whether that be a D, S, W, for example, when you follow it up with a plus, you're saying there's at least one, but possibly more of those. When you use a question mark instead of a plus sign, what you're telling the pattern is, hey, I don't know if this exists, but if it does, I know there's at least going to be one. And finally, when you're using those squiggly brackets with your digit in there, what that's telling the search pattern is you're looking for a sort of a range of characters. So in our previous example, we were looking for digits between 1 and 5 in character length. So it's looking for, like it says there, a specified instance or a count of that particular character. So a couple more characters, our meta characters, before we kind of hop into demos here. It's important to know what a capturing group is. So of course, with every Tableau calculation, you're going to have your parentheses already, but these exist kind of a lower level down. It's specifying exactly which group you want to identify as a search pattern. The brackets represent a range of characters, and I'll talk more about that in a second in the sets and ranges piece. And I already mentioned this a little bit, but the backslash, when followed by another meta character, it's going to make that character literal. It's called escaping that character out. So you saw the period already, but this could be a $sign, this could be a caret, a pipe, any sort of meta character that's used in regex. So sets and ranges. What this is, it's the A to Z within the bracket, of course, but again, it's case sensitive. So when you use this bracket with an A to Z within your search pattern, what you're telling Tableau or what you're telling the search pattern is, hey, I'm looking for the characters anywhere between A and Z, or uppercase A to Z, or 0 to 9. And these can be mixed and matched. So it is important, like I said, to know these are case sensitive. If you were to look for A to Z lowercase and your term or your substring happen to have an uppercase, it's not going to find it, right? Because you've only specified lowercase characters. And but wait, there's more, of course. So there's a bunch of additional meta characters we're not going to talk about today. Here are a few common ones. So the caret tells the search pattern that it's looking at the beginning of a string, or the $sign at the end of a string, or the pipe represents an either or. So if I'm looking for, say, bat or cat within my field or within my string, I'd use that pipe in that situation. All right, so before we get into the demo, we're going to take a look at what the 4 Tableau regex calculations do. First, regex extract. What this is going to do is pull you out the actual substring that you're looking for within the capturing group. So think of this as, in our example, we had a comment field and we only wanted to pull out the address. That's a good example of that. A regex match is a true-false statement. So this is going to return to you whether your search pattern exists within the field or column that you're looking at. Regex replace, think of this as a kind of a find and replace on steroids, right? It's going to look for your search pattern, and if it finds it, it's going to replace it with a term or another substring that you've specified. And finally, extract inth. So this is, of course, works the same way as extract, but it can find your substring based on the number of instances. So a good example of that might be, say, a URL, and you've identified the same pattern within the URL 3 or 4 times. You can use extract inth to identify exactly which instance of that match pattern you want to take action on. We're not going to dig into that one too much today, but we might follow up in a later session or a later presentation with that. So with that, let's kind of hop over to our demo. All right, so I'm actually going to stop video for a second because I got to switch screens. So what we have here is the Airbnb data for the greater Seattle area. I've kind of dirtied it up a little bit just for the sake of the demo. The first one example that we have is URLs. It's links to both users and rooms for the Airbnb data. And it looks like they've been concatenated. They've been mashed together a little bit. Looks like they're separated by the pipe here. But the problem is I couldn't use split on this because it looks like there's no common order. Sometimes the users is first, sometimes the rooms is first. So this is a great candidate for regex. So what we're going to do, let's hop in here, make this a little bit bigger for you to read. All right, so what we need to tell this regex statement is, of course, it's going to be a regex extract, and we're looking at the links field, which is what you see in the rows there. And we're going to take a little shortcut just in the interest of time. I know each one of these, it's going to begin with the Airbnb URL. So go ahead and put that in. We know that's how it's going to start. Now here's where it gets tricky. I'm telling Tableau that here's where my capturing search pattern begins. I know that each of these URLs is going to have a /, so I need to make that / literal. And then what I'm looking for is a range of A to Z, so it can be any character, lowercase, within that range, followed by another /. And I'm going to close that piece of the search pattern there. I know after that each one of these URLs is followed by some sort of ID field. It looks like they vary in ranges. Some of them are 4, some of them are 5 characters. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to tell Tableau I'm looking for a digit with lowercase d of unknown length. And we're going to close our capturing group and then close, one too many parentheses there, and close that calculation there. Go ahead and drag this to text, and you'll see what this has returned to me is all the instances of my rooms suffix from my URL. And why this worked is because the patterns between the rooms and the users URL are a little bit different. You can see rooms only has 1 instance of our A to Z range, where the users has 2, right? So we've specifically put a pattern together that's only going to match rooms. All right, so that's a good example of regex extract. And move over to match now. So again, still using the same Airbnb data. What we're going to do here, it looks like we have city, state, zip, but some of those zips don't look quite right. I want to return the zip codes or give me a true false on anything with a valid zip code. So this is where we're going to leverage match. So again, we're going to pull in regex match. The field we're looking at is that city, state, zip field. And what we need to do is, again, open up our capturing group. We're going to tell it the range of characters in our zip code can vary from 0 to 9. And the expected character length for that particular zip code is going to be 5. Whoops, fix that. So putting that in squiggly brackets, I'm telling it exactly how long I expect those characters to be. And finally, we're going to close our capturing group, close our calculation, and hit OK. Dragging that to text, you see that's going to return to me a series of true false. The trues are, of course, valid zip codes. The false tells me, hey, I'm missing a digit here. Same thing up here as well. So that's our example for match. One last one, we're going to move on to replace. Going to go ahead and edit this. What we're doing here is this is the description of those Airbnb houses or locations, right? So what we want to do with regex replace is we're going to replace any partial references of bedroom or abbreviations. So this one gets a little tricky. So again, we're going to pull up our regex statement. And the field we're looking at is strangely called name. And now I know it's abbreviated in only a handful of ways. All right, so it's going to be some combination of BDRM. So what I'm going to do is uppercase, lowercase b. I'm looking for uppercase, lowercase d, uppercase, I'm sorry, I should have started with a bracket here. Uppercase, lowercase r, and same thing with m. Going to close that bracket. So that specified my range of characters that could possibly be. I know that's likely going to be followed with a space. So what I'm going to do here is \s for space. And now it's going to ask me for what I want to replace it with. So I'm going to replace it with the full term bedroom. And we'll close my calculation. And hit OK. And put this on text. And you can see that now instead of 1 BDRM, we've returned 1 bedroom. What we didn't account for in hindsight is the BDS, which we should have, but same thing. So you can see that any instances of BDRM, any abbreviations has now been replaced with this exception. Looks like what happened here is it was followed instead of by a space, by a the squiggly little line there. We should have used a wildcard maybe instead of a space, but that's okay. So those are our examples of regex and how you can use them in Tableau. I'm going to hop back over to my presentation here. Let's see. All right. And 1 second. So if you want to continue learning regex, I'm going to make available here. These are some of the resources I've used to kind of learn. Like I said, this is something I picked up rather recently. I would definitely recommend that first video. David Petranik is a friend of mine. He's a Tableau employee, solutions engineer, I believe is his title. He presented at TC18. Great presentation. It's on YouTube and Tableau's channel. So if you're interested in learning more about regex, here are some of the resources I'd recommend. And with that, that's it for me. So I want to open it up to questions, if there are any.
I don't see any questions right at the moment, but if y'all have questions for Tim, go ahead and drop them in the chat or in the Q&A box.
For sure.
And let's just check the chat to see what's going on. Oh, got some good, great examples. Yeah. I love the practical demo. I saw you reference regex 101. Do you find other tools that work too?
Other tools. So that URL there at the bottom, that's actually a web-based kind of regex tool that you can use to practice your statements. That's the one I haven't used, and I haven't strayed far from it. So if there are others that work better, I just don't know yet.
Okay, and then we've got a couple of other questions here. Can these regex statements slow down Tableau?
Great question. And that's actually was brought up in David's presentation in Vegas in 18. And I'm going to defer to his answer. And he said no. They compute the same way as a contained statement would, even though they are a little bit more complicated. Now, I've in all transparency, I haven't done any side-by-side performance testing myself. So that's something I'll probably look into here in the near future.
Awesome. Another question, how long did it take you to really feel comfortable with regex?
A little bit. So I've tried to put this presentation together for the better part of, 2 months or so. And, I kept coming back to it, and I would feel defeated for a little bit. And finally I said, I just want to get it done. So I, like I said, went through David's presentation and really kind of put my head down and went for it. But long story short, it probably took the better part of 2 or 3 months to feel like I could write a regex statement without having to reference notes constantly.
All right. And then what should be the preference, regex or other functions like replace or true false?
Yeah, so I would say use regex when you absolutely need it. This isn't something I would use every day, but when you do need it, it's going to save your life. What David used to tell me all the time when, back when we used to talk routinely is, you'll know when you need regex, right? It's going to be those obvious use cases where, like I said, it's free-form text fields, and you're looking for a particular pattern, right? That's the important thing is you're searching for a pattern. And if your data is unstructured, again, that's a big clue that you're going to need regex. But it's not something I would start with. If contains, if splits, if these sort of things are going to do the job for you, start there and go to regex if those don't work.
Awesome. And then we have another question in the chat. Can you discuss when to use quote groups with the capturing pattern?
Well, the single quotes are going to specify that I'm looking for a string. I don't know if that quite answers the question, but the capturing group, whenever you see those parentheses within the regex statement, that specifies, like I mentioned earlier, what exactly I want to return. So like I said, if I'm matching or replacing, I might not necessarily use those. I hope I'm understanding the question. If not, feel free to follow up with me and we can talk more about it.
Awesome. And it's also in the chat too, Tim. So
Okay,
that way
yeah,
you don't
I'll
have
check
to
it
go
out.
back to it. All right. No other questions that I see, just a lot of like great stuff, really great, all kinds of
Excellent.
thanks in there. So thank
All
you
right.
so much for sharing about this today, because I think that it was super helpful for a lot of folks.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Of course. I'm not even holding it against you that you're an Eagles fan.
A lot of people do, so I wouldn't be too hurt, but all right.
All right, we're going to take a short break and then be back